and welcome to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'll be your host. Now, on today's episode, we're going to head over to the church for our new organist job. We're going to head over to the, dress shop to get some new dresses. But also, we're going to, also drive over to that weird pavilion that, we can't stop looking at because I don't know. It's just so enticing. But anyway, besides all of that, we're going to be covering today 1962's Carnival of Souls. Now, my history with this film is, this is a recent watch for me, okay? And I hadn't really seen it before. I hadn't really even heard of it, to be honest with you. And so I was like, all right, let me go watch this with my little Shudder subscription, right? Why not? And so I watched it and I loved so much about it, and it's so great, so influential to the horror genre, and everything about it is just wonderful. So that's why I couldn't just do this with myself, okay? I needed to bring a guest with me today because this movie is just, there's so much to it. And I'm thankful to have also found somebody who, knows a lot about this movie, and we're going to, shoot the shit about all of it and talk to you like we normally do. So he is an arts administrator. He is a professor. He is working to try to be one of the youngest, if not the youngest, hosts for TCM, Turner Classic Movies. And also he's been on Friends of the Pod, Movies That Made Us Gay, a total of 6 times. I was just talking about this off air. But please welcome to the podcast, Jackson Cooper. Hello, Jackson. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's not like we weren't just literally talking for whole half hour before this, but that's fine. We didn't have to air any of that.
All good, all good. The audience just came in the building, so welcome, audience.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see you all here.
Exactly. Now, I mentioned a little bit about my, history. Like I said, this is a recent watch for me. I think I watched this for the first time in last year, really. And I said how much I loved it. But Jackson, I want to hear from you, though. Why? And I asked you to be on the show. Me and you know each other from actually Pickens, friend of the show.
Yeah.
But I had heard you actually the first time on the Movies That Made Us Gay. Shout out Pete and Scott. Doing Friday the 13th Part 2, which that's one of my favorite Friday movies. I love that movie. So good. But I was like, the fact that I'm talking to you now is really kind of surreal to me because I'm like, oh my God, I was literally just watching, I was listening to you a year ago and now I'm talking to you. So it's kind of great. But anyway, but I did reach out to you and I said, hey, I'd love to have you on the show one day. You seem like a good movie gay. Why not? And I asked you, what would you want to cover? Because I want whoever's on the show to be interested in what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And this was one of your picks. So what is it about Carnival of Souls? Why are we covering this today? What is it about this movie that makes you interested?
Okay, well, for you and the listeners at home, let's do 2 stories. One is my childhood connection to this, and then one is my the book gossip that I had promised you offline that we would talk about. But yeah, my connection with this, oh my gosh, it started when I got so as an elder millennial, I remember going to the dollar store and there were just boxes of DVDs for $1, and they were never good. They were always Christian tainted movies. But then there was this one, it was 50 horror movie classics, and I was like, 50 movies for $1, Mom, can I get that? And I remember we got it, and I made my way through all of these really bad B movies. Some of them were really good. That was the first time I ever saw Night of the Living Dead and it was always 2 movies on one disc side. So you had 4 movies each disc. So it was great for double features. And so I remember watching Carnival of Souls and going, this is a weirdly good movie. And there was so much eeriness and atmosphere when I watched it. So there's a real nostalgic quality I have to this movie because I remember watching it late at night in my bedroom, the glow of the TV and those shots of Candace Hilligoss on the pavilion and walking through, just really creeping me out as a kid. So it's the movie that I go back to the most, and I think that I've seen the most next to Night of the Living Dead. I think it's just one of the best, and we're going to get into it, but one of the best and most influential movies that weirdly not a lot of people know about. So I really like that.
It's criminally underrated. I will
So
say
much.
that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
That this movie is. I also love how you were able to get like 50 movies for $1. I love that.
Oh, it was great.
But
And I watched all of them. Like I remember some were awful. I mean, but then some were really great. Night of Living Dead, Brain That Wouldn't Die, Creature from the Haunted Sea. Like I remember vividly, my sort of cult cinema education starting with those that box set.
I love that. And yeah, but I think this movie in particular is so underrated, and so I think maybe horror fans are starting to come around to it, but God damn it, this is such a good movie. Anyway, oh God, I can't.
No,
And we'll get all into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I'm really grateful for Criterion Collection for putting out a beautiful, beautiful remaster of it, and
I might put that on the list. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna buy it. Maybe.
Yeah, it's worth seeing it, and it also has some great featurettes and special features, as well as both cuts of the movie, which there were allegedly 2 cuts, an uncut version and then the release version, and it's just a really, like you said, criminally underrated. When I was doing research for my book on it, I was really struck by how many people were influenced by it and had not credited it towards the things that they actively stole. So I think it still lives on, and I hope it really has a renaissance now with this new Criterion transfer.
I also didn't know there's 2 cuts to this movie. What the hell? Oh my God, now I'm buying this thing. Now I need to, because I need to watch these 2 cuts. All right.
well, let me just say real quick, the cuts are not in any way revolutionary. It's not Blade Runner at all or anything like that. In fact, the 2 cuts were so controversially, the thing about this movie and sort of why it fell into the public domain was Herk Harvey, who had directed it, sold it to this distributor called Hertz Lion, and they had taken it and cut it so that it would be more appealing to drive-in audiences and teenagers and things like that. There's a total of 3 minutes cut from the original thing. And when you watch the 2, you see the scenes that are cut, and it's, I think I know them off the top of my head. There's one where after she leaves her hometown church, the preacher or the organ factory owner goes and talks to the guy who's cutting wood, and there's a long scene between them, and then the chase scene at the end is extended by 1 minute. It's again, it's not Blade Runner quality cuts. It's it's just so minuscule, and yet Herk Harvey was very offended that they cut anything from it. So
I would be too. So we got into your childhood fascination and interest of this movie. So we're going to finally spill some of the tea that you have with this. So you in particular actually did write technically a book on this particular movie, but you ran into some drama. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
I would love to elaborate on this. I love telling people this story because this was one of those great, I don't even want to call it a show business story. It was like a publishing story. So I had reached out a few years ago to a publisher who publishes books on horror movies, where they're small 90 to 100 page books on horror films, and basically written by experts, but also cultural enthusiasts and people who just really love it. But the titles of the book are the titles of the movie. So there's one on Blood on Satan's Claw. It's called Blood on Satan's Claw. There's one on The Sixth Sense. It's The Sixth Sense. So I reached out and I said, hey, I love this movie, Carnival of Souls. I think it's very influential. And so I wrote this book. I wrote the book in the span of 4 weeks. With research and getting the images and stuff like that, and then sitting down and reading it, also going literally frame by frame and with the movie and writing an analysis of it. So I turn it in and I don't hear anything from the editor. And this editor was, an editor for a big university press. And so a few weeks later, he reaches out and says, hey, so we actually, because they had started the pre-orders of the book, they said, we actually got this message from this lawyer of this guy who owns the trademark of Carnival of Souls, like the trademark title, Carnival of Souls, for anything that's published as a book or, anything, not a movie, but just as a book. And this guy apparently has gone up against, NBC and all these things, like threatening lawsuits. And so my editor said, we don't want a lawsuit, so we're going to have to pull the book. And I said, okay, like, yes, I understand that. That's fine. So then years later, I was really like, I still wanted to publish it because Criterion just came out with its DVD. And I said, oh, it's getting some traction. And I think more people need to know about this. So I decided to self-publish my manuscript under a different title. And the title is called The Movie That Wouldn't Die, which actually was a title of one of the documentary that was made about the movie. And so I, fixed up the manuscript and I put it on the Amazon self-publishing thing and put it out there. And as I was kind of expecting, a few weeks later, I get an email from Amazon that says, hey, someone has reached out to us saying that your publication violates a trademark. And pretty sure it was this guy, even though Carnival of Souls was not in the title or anywhere near the synopsis or on any copy. So they said, we're just going to have to pull it. So I now have a few copies of this unpublished manuscript about Carnival of Souls if anyone out there is interested in reading about it. So that's the drama of that. It sounds it's not as Aaron Brockovich as I have it in my head, but still it was, it's been a back and forth.
I think it's absolutely Barry Brockovich, to be honest with you, because I actually recently watched that movie too, and I loved it. I think it absolutely is. Listen, because we're not trying to keep like queer creators down and talking about our movies that we
Thank
like.
you.
Okay, God damn it.
Thank you.
And you also said, and I'm not afraid to say it. Okay, I don't know this guy's name, but you were saying that he has a comic book series. It's probably horrible. Okay, and then also like, but what I don't understand with this is like literally like, okay, so you made a comic called Carnival of Souls, which probably isn't even based off of this movie, to be perfectly honest. I don't think so, probably. But like, really though, like, what the hell? Like, that makes no sense. And I'm like, is it really that serious? You know what I mean? For you to go after like people like yourself, but also like goddamn NBC. Like, we really think you're gonna win that? Are you kidding me? Like, what?
That's what I was so upset about, because I said, this book is being sold for $12.99. I'm getting 20%
Exactly.
of that for each book sold. I am not going to make a single, $200 in 5 years on this book. And even the Amazon thing, I put like the print, I put the Kindle out for free and then the print for like $10. I said, I'm not trying to make money off of this. I'm just trying to publish my work, and something so that people who are interested in this movie can go and read a little bit more about all this research I did. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's like, it's not that serious. Come on, dude. It's okay. Anyway. I'm happy to share the manuscript with anyone out there who wants to read it if they're interested.
Yeah, we've also... On this pod, I have no fear, so I just, not that I call out a bunch of people. I did tell Jared Leto to fuck off on my Urban Legend episode because he can. And he also just owns that movie, which is horrible. And I've had to like call out like Scott Rudin before because he did do Clueless, and he's a piece of shit, as you probably know.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yes.
But...
yes, so that is my spilling the tea on the book drama.
Yeah, but now we have this book drama out of the way, but now we're going to move on to a little bit more of just like how this movie came to be, and move into a little bit more of what we normally do on the show, where we talk about, like the production history, we talk about, the plot, obviously, and things of that sort. So without further ado, let's get into that. So Carnival of Souls, according to, I think it was Wikipedia or IMDb, was released on September 26th, 1962, back in the day. Okay. This was written by John Clifford, the story was, but it was directed and produced by who you said earlier, Herk Harvey. So that was, and we'll talk a little bit about him in the production history part. The budget for this movie, everybody, is $33,000. So this movie is more expensive than like Paranormal Activity, I guess. Less
Yeah,
expensive
just
than the
about.
Blair Witch Project,
Paranormal was about
but
half
you
of that.
know,
Yeah.
yeah. But we're looking at that. I have no box office information because, to be honest with you, I don't think this really released like that. So I don't have it to share. I wish I did. But we're looking at an 87% on the tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes, and then a 73% audience score. So it's, on the up and up. I'm looking at a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb and a letterbox score of 3.7 out of 5, which are very apt and wonderful, and I like that. For our cast of characters, we have Candace Hilligoss as Mary Henry. We have Francis Feist as Mr. Thomas. We have Sidney Berger as John Linden, the guy across the way. Art Ellison as the minister. Stan Levitt as Dr. Samuels. Tom McGinnis as the organ factory boss, and also Forbes Caldwell as the guy who works in the organ factory. We have Dan Palmquist as the guy at the gas station near the end who works there. Bill DeJarnett as the mechanic that I guess she meets along the way. Steve Boozer as Chip, one of John Linden's friends. Pamela Ballard as the dress sales lady, and also Herk Harvey as one of the main ghouls. We'll get into some of the critical response of this movie. So we have 3 of these that I can talk about. So we have like Steve Hunter from the Baltimore Sun. Hey, shout out Baltimore Sun, who he says, as a piece of film craftsmanship, it's beneath contempt. Okay. Hal
Okay.
Lipper from the Tampa Bay Times, who says there's no gore and only minimal chills. The movie could bore rather than scare you to death. And then we also have Jeff Brown from the Times UK, which is a UK publication, who states, for all its odd, haunting moments, Carnival of Souls is best appreciated and knocked off its pedestal. Because I like focusing on some of the rude comments that people make about movies because I think it's more fun than just talking about like how wonderful they are, because we all already know
Yeah.
how wonderful they are. But
Yeah.
but
I was gonna say I have a good Roger Ebert one here, but yeah, let's focus on the rude. I like the rude ones
yeah.
more.
What's the Roger Ebert one though? I want to hear it.
Like a lost episode from the Twilight Zone, it plays to supernatural right in the middle of everyday life and surrounds it with ordinary people. It ventures into the edge of camp but never strays across the line, taking itself with an eerie seriousness. So he actually liked it when it was re-released.
Can get into that, yeah, and we'll talk about Twilight Zone because
Yes.
yes, this is very much that. So now we're going to move into a little bit of the production history. So this is definitely a lot of Jackson's kind of. I do have some information, of course, but I think
I can
because you did
verify.
technically write a book on it, I want to make sure that we talk about this before we move into any kind of plot or whatever.
Yeah.
So if we're going to talk about Carnival of Souls, we have to talk about the director of this film and the producer, Herk Harvey. So Herk Harvey was a director and a producer of industrial and educational films. So like those fun training videos you watch at work, or like the stuff that you watch at school and shit. That's what he worked on pretty much. And he was based in Lawrence, Kansas, in the middle of goddamn nowhere, Kansas. So when he was working for the Centron Corporation, so that's where he worked at. And while returning to Kansas after shooting a Centron film in California, because he would travel around, I guess, for work, Harvey developed the idea for Carnival of Souls after he drove past the abandoned Saltier Pavilion, which is in Salt Lake City. Is that what is in the movie, if I may ask?
That's the exact one that is in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. So he drove past this fucking weird ass thing that was probably made by Mormons. Who knows? But anyway, because it's in the middle of Salt Lake. So, but he is quoted as saying, when I got back to Lawrence, I asked my friend and coworker at Centron Films, John Clifford, who was a writer, how he'd like to write a feature. And he recalled the last scene I told him I wanted a bunch of ghouls to be dancing in a ballroom, and the rest was up to him, pretty much. So he was pretty much just saying, like, hey, boo, hey, friend, I have a story I want you to write. Oh, the only thing I need you to do is keep that a bunch of ghosts are going to be like dancing with each other, but you do whatever the hell else you want. And he wrote it in 3 weeks. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, I mean, that's how this movie really came to be. Guy was just driving past something. He was like, yo, that place is fucking creepy. Let's make a movie about it, which I kind of love, actually.
Hey, John, you know what we should do? We're going to make a horror movie, and the horror movie's going to have ghouls. Write it. I need it in 3 weeks. We start shooting in 4. Yeah, that's exactly how
No,
I
like
imagine that
literally.
conversation going.
Like
What's
actually,
interesting
though.
about the Salt Air is that it actually used to be a bathhouse way back in the day. And it is the fact that it stayed like that for so long, just abandoned, and no one had really done anything with it. I love those shots in the movie where they go into it. It's just absolutely, yeah, breathtaking. But yeah, it's a Harvey had a great idea with imagining a ghost story from that huge pavilion.
Exactly. Yeah. It making sense. When you're talking about it's a bathhouse, are you talking about that it was just like a public bath for people to go to, or like the kind of bathhouse we know about? You know what
I
I mean?
think it might have been both.
Huh.
I didn't dive that deep into that research. But I I did know it used to be a bathhouse way back in the day, and I think they even reference it in the movie. The gas station attendant says it to her in the first when she's driving. But it's gorgeous. Just it's a gorgeous piece of architecture. Like I love all the nooks and crannies of it all.
I love that. So yeah, so pretty much like Herk Harvey was like, I want to make a movie, and he wanted his friend to write it. And so, okay, cool. I have a story. Now I gotta go cast it, I guess, right? So in New York City, he was Herc was there one day, and he discovered a then 23-year-old actress, Candace Hilligoss, who had trained with Lee Strasberg in his institute and was one of his students. And he cast her in the lead role of Mary Henry. So she had actually been offered a role in a movie called Violet Midnight, which was done by Richard Hilliard, but she opted to do this role instead. She stated that at the time she took the role as a take the money and run type of situation, and she was paid apparently $2,000 for her work on this film, which I guess in 1962 standards, I don't really know. I mean, obviously there were like huge movie stars that were getting
I think
more,
that was pretty,
but
yeah, but it was still
yeah,
pretty good. Still pretty good.
still pretty good. And from what I've kind of gathered, in a weird way, it didn't fracture her career, really. She just didn't do a lot after this movie, which
No,
is so fucking tragic because she is so compelling in this movie. So compelling. Like, I believe
yeah,
everything that she does. And she's so pretty to look at. And she just is somebody who I'm like, God, she could have had like way more of a career. And yeah, she's just really I don't know, breathtaking. She's just like so interesting to look at. So
yeah.
there's
She
that.
has a
Yeah,
really great like Hitchcock blonde quality to her. That was something that I
absolutely.
recognized when I watched it this last time. Was I was just like, she's very Tippi Hedren. She's very Kim Novak. Obviously Janet Leigh. The Psycho after effects of Psycho are very rampant in this movie if you watch it like that. So yeah, she's absolutely great, and she did one movie after this, which was called The Curse of the Living Corpse, which she's actually pretty good in. The movie's not great. It's a exactly what it sounds like. It's a B movie kind of Agatha Christie knockoff horror movie, but she's great in it. And you're right. It's like I would love to see her do Streetcar Named Desire, or like
Listen,
any like
yes.
really great Hollywood picture. So, but she was more of a theater actress. So I think she stayed pretty steady doing like summer stock after this. But she didn't really make many movies after this one. No. And
That's
that's
true.
not just because of the fact that being in a horror cast in a horror movie at this time was sort of seen as the equivalent of movie stars going on game shows, and like your
Right,
career's
right.
done. But also because she had a really bad experience with Herk Harvey. One of the things I write about in the book is that there's a lot of parallels between the way Harvey treated her and the way Kubrick treated Shelley Duvall in The Shining, where Harvey like rarely spoke to Hilligoss. He barely gave her any direction. He, would have her do sort of take after take after take and then, move on to something else. So there was a lot of, I don't want to say abuse because it's not documented as that, but there was just a lot of this sort of psychological power play between the two of them. And so it kind of feeds into her performance where she feels very lost, she doesn't know what's going on. And I think that Harvey's lack of direction of her and lack of belief and kind of played into her own character as Mary. So I thought that was really interesting. So she was very affected by the making of this movie, from what I read about in the research.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't even know anything about that. And again, I think it plays so much into her character, and it's so awful because it's like method but not actually method because you're just going through hell.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, oh god. Ugh.
And she, later, I mean, there's a great documentary where there's a reunion of Carnival of Souls, and she's there, and Herk Harvey's there, and John Stanley's there. Like all these people are there from it. So it's not like she harbored any resentment to him. I think it just turned off turned her off from filmmaking, as a result. I don't think she had any bad blood for the movie once the legacy sort of took off after that.
That's true. That's fair. Completely fair. A little fun fact too. So John Linden, who's the across the way neighbor, who is a dick in this movie, by the way, but he is kind of charming at first. But Sidney Berger is his name, and I found out that apparently he's no longer with us, but he became the chairperson of the acting and drama department at University of Houston,
Yeah.
and he was also the director of the Houston Film, the Shakespeare Festival. He stepped down in 2007. He died in 2012 or something. But I just think that's so cool. I don't really know what other movies he was in, but I kind of love the fact that he probably only got a few movies under his belt. He was like, yeah, I'm just going to go be an acting professor, which honestly, and I love all my acting professors I had. Like, oh my God, I love you all so much. The two I had like were amazing. But I mean, like, yeah, it's not like they were in like a ton of, they were in theater, that's what they
Right.
did. They
Right.
weren't like,
Yeah.
and that is what happens, like, unless you go to somewhere like goddamn NYU, and maybe you get a person who like, although you remember when like James Franco like taught at NYU for a minute, and I was like, yeah,
Oh
okay,
yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah.
um
And you're just doing this as a part of your next performance piece, but
yeah,
good for you.
okay.
Yeah.
Good for you. Although, did you know, you're a little older than me, I think. Did you know that for a time, well, also Casey Lemons is also on staff there apparently. Eve's Bayou, and like she just did the
What?
Whitney movie. Yeah, Casey Lemons. She
Okay.
works at NYU, I think. And her Vondi Curtis Hall is her husband. And if you know who he is, he's an actor. He was
Yeah.
in Eve's Bayou, and he was
Right.
recently in The Night House, but
Yeah.
he also teaches there too. But also, little fun fact too: Elizabeth Hess was an actress lady, and she is mostly known for she was a teacher up there apparently, and she is most, I think, well known by me at least, for being the mom from Clarissa Explains It All. So good for her being a little acting
Oh
professor
my
up
god.
there.
Good for them. Yeah. You
I
know
love
what? I
that.
want to be taught by her. I want to be taught by her.
Hell yes, I would love
Hell
that.
yeah.
Anyway, that's the weird thing about, because I went to school for theater and all that, and so that's the weird thing you
Same.
get
Me too.
sometimes is like, yeah, like that's the weird thing you get sometimes where like you're like, what the fuck? Like, who are some of these professors that you get? Like, because some of them you're like, okay, they were a theater actor or whatever, but then I'm assuming that sometimes when you get like your acting professors, especially if they're an adjunct or something, you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know who you think you are sometimes, but like it's this inflated sense of self I think they can have sometimes because maybe they were
Yeah.
like in like a movie like or two,
Right, right.
and
Yeah,
you're like, okay,
I had acting professors who were like that. They were like, "I was a background actor on this very big movie." And it was like, "Okay, but that doesn't qualify you to teach acting." Sorry, dude,
yeah,
but
I'm
yeah.
sorry about that. Anyway, but yeah, so enough about us like talking shit about our education. It's not really, but anyway, but we're gonna get into the filming of this. So okay, we have our cast, now we have to film. So Harvey shot this movie in 3 weeks on location in Lawrence, Kansas, and Salt Lake City. I guess they're near each other, or you can drive to them, I guess.
It's
um
drivable. It's Yeah, I mapped it out when I was writing the book. It's drivable. Yeah, it's drivable. And
he
they
took
and they shot first in Kansas and then went to Salt Lake and then went and did some reshoots in Kansas. Yeah.
Love it. So he took 3 weeks off of his job to direct the film. He started with an initial production budget of $17,000. He then raised that from asking local businessmen if they were willing to give $500 for the production. So he had like people just give him money, being like, "Hey, do you want to give to my production of my movie I'm making?" The other 13,000 of the total $30,000 budget, which again it's like 30 to 33,000, was just deferred. So he was just able to all right, it'll happen, and I promise, like, it'll make some money, I guess. He was able
Right.
to get the rental of the site, the Saltier Pavilion, for $50. And many of the other scenes, like, so Mary going to the department store, I'm sure in some of the other parts she's done, were really just done, like, literally, like, guerrilla style stuff. Like, he just went to a place and paid off some of the locals to be like, "Hey, can I
Yeah.
film here real quick?"
Yeah.
That's how you did it back then a little bit when you weren't. I mean, this is like such a feat of low budget filmmaking. It's so crazy. Um,
Well, and what I love about
yeah.
it, sorry to interrupt, but what
No,
I
you're
love
good.
about it too that I uncovered in the research was that he was using his work, film, and cameras and equipment and all this stuff. So he took 3 weeks off, but then he also used all of this professional filmmaking equipment. So everything had to be one take or two. So he really had to think through every single shot and then be like, we're going to do this. There you go. Like, you couldn't do 5 or 6 takes for every shot. Like, he had to do like one or two and then you moved on. So when you watch the movie like that, it's kind of incredible because some of those shots are really well thought out and beautifully conceptualized. So it's, yeah,
100%.
it's kind of amazing low budget film wise, like you said, that he could pull that off with such a low budget.
Yeah, this movie looks so pretty, and the fact that it's like it's only made for 30 something thousand dollars. It's insane. But yeah, so he just employed techniques he had already learned about to like help save on costs that he did. So again, that's just what he did. I won't get into too much crazy other stuff that I got from this, but like his assistant director was Reza Badaii, I guess, who was a immigrant from Iran who was just beginning his film career. And so at that time, he had been working on a Robert Altman film called The Delinquents, and he ended up then going and doing like openings and montages for shows like Hawaii Five O, Get Smart, and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. So he might have been the one who like literally like does the whole like love is all around or whatever. That's kind of fun.
Right.
Um,
I didn't know that. That's
it,
amazing.
he might have done that. I don't actually know who did that, but the fact that he was involved in that after this movie is really cool.
What I also love is that the most expensive thing on the production was the repairing of the bridge
Oh yeah, I was
in
just
the
about to get
first
into that.
scene. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
want
I love that. Anyway, yeah.
you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I don't know how much it was, but I just remember reading the tidbit in two different sources that the most expensive part of the production was the bridge at the beginning of the movie, that where the car falls off. They had to replace the bridge, and the county or the town charged them this, like $100 or $200 or something like that. And that was the most expensive thing they spent money on in the production.
Yeah, I got this thing from Wikipedia, so I mean, it might be true. Apparently, where did it come from? I wonder. It came from where the hell is it coming from? But it came from so the town did not charge a fee for the use of it. Apparently, only requiring
Right,
them to replace the bridge's
right,
damaged rails, and apparently that was only done at a cost of $12 for the repair. Because again, they had to like break through it because they fall into the
right.
river. We'll get to it, but yeah, that's kind of cool. A little bit about the music score. So if you haven't already seen this film, like literally, like it has such a
Ugh,
beautiful organ score. Oh
that's
my
the best.
god! And it was done by a local guy, Gene Moore. He's an organist and composer. A film and music scholar by the name of Julie Brown, who I love, Julie Brown from Clueless and Bloody Birthday. But
But
anyway,
she wrote a really good essay on the, was it Organs of Horror or something like that? Yeah, that's a
yeah, of course, it's the same
yeah,
person, obviously.
yeah, same
But
person.
she mentions the organ is one of the most spectral presences in Carnival of Souls, summoning up or being summoned up by the various allusions in the film to cinema's past. And John Clifford, the screenwriter, has stated that the locations that Harvey chose influenced the decision to make a organ score in particular. So then, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Do you have any information about the release of this movie, or like why didn't it really have a whole lot of box office information, or what happened maybe with the release of the film?
Well, what happened, from what I understand about what happened with the release, was that it really, so Harvey was sort of shopping it around. They had a premiere in Kansas, and it was, very successful. Everyone loved it, and some people showed up in makeup, white face makeup and ghoul makeup. Um, and then Harvey thought to sell it to a distributor. So Hertz Lion was the one that they ultimately sold it to, because Hertz Lion said, "We're going to capitalize on what was going on in the late 50s and early 60s with drive-ins and horror movies." But Hertz Lion got it. They cut it up, aka cut out 3 minutes, and then they started to put it out. But then Hertz Lion went bankrupt. So it ultimately fell into the public domain, and Harvey saw no profits from it, which was really unfortunate. And it kind of, that's sort, and he was so distraught. It was really sad. It was so distraught by how that relationship with Hertz Lion, the distributor, ended up, that he just never bothered to put it back out. But then there was a revival in, I think, the late 80s, early 90s or something like that. I forget what prompted it. Maybe there was some anniversary of it. But it started to be shown around in independent art house theaters around America, and people started to really, pay attention to it and say, this is a really great film. This is very underappreciated. It was obviously shown on television in the 60s and 70s, and when it fell into the public domain. So yeah, it was just really, it was really sad. Harvey was really distraught after the Hertz Lion fallout, that he didn't, yeah, it didn't really make any money until it was re-released in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, I see there's a trend. I've only been doing this show for a few months, but I see there's a trend sometimes of how sometimes production companies just go under when there's about to be a movie like making, coming out. And that affects the film, which then I think turns it into this cult classic because they really didn't get much of like a release, or like they were just kind of like seen as this one other thing. Examples of this are like Elvira Mistress of the Dark. Hey girl, I have mentioned you now twice. But if you don't
Best.
already know, literally that movie, like New World Pictures had it, and then literally they went out of business not too long after. Same thing with Heathers. Like that also happened by New World Pictures. Like, good old Roger Corman. But it's like that, you have like that. Hocus Pocus, I mentioned that in my episode, they didn't even have a premiere for that movie. Like that was a Disney movie. And
Yeah,
Romy Michelle.
yeah,
Like Romy Michelle, so Hocus Pocus was released by Disney technically, and they didn't even have a premiere for that movie. So they put all that money into that, but they were putting a lot of their money into Nightmare Before Christmas, really. And
right.
that was
At
more of
the same
a
time.
summer hit that they did, or a
Yeah.
summer release that they did, but they didn't even have a release for that movie. They didn't even have like a premiere for it. And the same thing with Romy Michelle. They had like a really slapped together premiere for that movie, and they really, Touchstone tried to bury that movie. People tend to forget. And then it kind of
Hmm.
came back as
Yeah.
this cult classic thing because it was showing on TV and things like that. But I think there's a trend here. There's a ton of those examples of like, I think that's partly why some films become cult classics, because they're forgotten, or they're like a part of this like sort of scandalous thing that happened, and they kind of just went underground in a weird way. So, do you have any other examples of that, like, that you can think of?
Well, I mean, New World Pictures is probably the most famous. So if anyone wants to Google New World Pictures and hear about that, and then even hear about, I mean, when I was a film programmer and I wanted to program Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, I was told by several friends in the film programming industry that, in fact, you have to contact the person who distributes the rights to show Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, which was this one guy who was a lawyer who had been part of New World Pictures, and you had to call him in Nevada and beg for him to give you Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. So, yeah, I mean, Hertz Lion is a great example of older. And there were just so many pop-up distribution and production companies at this time, distribution especially, where they were just sort of, for lack of a better phrase, like whoring out these movies to drive-ins and to exploitation theaters and stuff like that to make a buck. And that goes back as early as like the 30s with like people who were just traveling around the country showing movies in order to make a buck. So, but yeah, New World Pictures I think is the best example of that. Shout out to New World Pictures if you're
Absolutely.
still out there, but I think they've sold some of the rights. I think they've given a lot of rights over, if I'm not mistaken, because Elvira, Mistress of the Dark had a wonderful Shout Factory release recently. So
Yes, yes. And it's on, like, different places. You could stream it all over the place. But yeah, no, I just think that's like a weird kind of like thing we see that just happens, or like I was saying with Romeo and Michelle, like that was Touchstone. That's a Disney place, but like they buried that shit because I don't think they had faith in the movie, like, and not at all. It's just one of those weird things. But
Drop Dead
you know,
Gorgeous too. I mean, that's a great example of that. That was, I
yeah.
think, Miramax, but that was buried as well. So, even
Oh yeah.
these big studios, like you said, just can bury these when they think it's not going to perform well. So
Right. Or it's also that. So Drop Dead Gorgeous, like you were saying, even Sugar and Spice to a point. I haven't seen that movie, but that was an example where Lona Williams, who did Drop Dead Gorgeous, if you don't already know, she is the third judge in the movie. But she also wrote it and is based off her own life, kind of, sort of. But she also did Sugar and Spice, which is a movie about cheerleaders with Marley Shelton, all that stuff. I talk a little bit about it in Bring It On episode because they were kind of the dueling cheerleading movies. But Lona Williams actually took her name off of Sugar and Spice because she was so upset with how this went. Honestly, I don't think it was the vision she was looking for that ended up happening. Let's just say there's that. And and then also like Disturbing Behavior. Have you ever heard of Disturbing
yes,
Behavior?
yeah.
That was another one too where it's in like the Faculty kind of realm of horror movies. Disturbing Behavior was from a guy who, and we're doing an episode on it at some point. Okay, listen, you'll hear about this, but like that movie, the director got the movie he wanted. He definitely did. But it got cut up so badly that now what our theatrical release is now of 80 something minutes is what we have. And it's kind of a disjointed story. It's a good movie, but that also happens too, where a movie gets cut to shit. I mean, there's that. I talk about it in, I have my Pam Grier moment on my Bogus Journey episode, but I talk about Bones. That was another one too. Bones with Snoop
Bones. There
Dogg.
was
It was
Michael
supposed to
Mann's
be,
The Keep, which was cut down from
yeah,
3 hours to 80
God,
minutes and completely missed.
insanity. Like,
Insanity, yeah. But and I
yeah,
but then I think about like thinking about redonkulousness. Like Harvey was really upset with Hertz Lion when they cut 3 minutes, like 3 minutes of the
right.
fine, and then released it to drive-ins, thinking that it was going to elevate the horror, and it doesn't. When you watch the 3 minutes, you're just like, okay, like right, like it's just more plot development. So I think for this film they were being a little dramatic. So I think filmmakers can be a little touchy when it comes to that.
Again, it's because it's their baby and all that, and I
The
get it.
baby,
But
yes,
anyway,
yeah.
but to move into the legacy of this movie has gained a cult following since its release. It's considered a low budget classic completely. It's been involved. It's been on lists like Complex Magazine named it number 39 of its 50th scariest movies ever made. Slant put it at number 32 as the 100 best horror movies of all time. The Academy Film Archive in 2012 restored it. And so, that was just a precursor to what Criterion did, and now it's in the Criterion collection. So that's always really good, too. This movie, and me and Jackson were talking about this offline when we were Instagram DMing, but I mean, I can tell for a fact that 20-something-year-old David Lynch was in Montana somewhere, wherever the hell he was, and he watched this movie and was like, I'm gonna make a movie.
I say that in my book, where I say like you can actually trace back, like, given the time period that this came in. So let's think about this, 1962, and how young a young David Lynch was, how young a young George Romero was, and the fact that movies that fell into the public domain, such as this one, were played constantly on late night television. You hear stories from these filmmakers and such where they were like, I used to stay up after my parents went to sleep and watch Bride of the Monster. And so you can totally draw a straight line between Eraserhead and Carnival of Souls, and also Night of Living Dead and Carnival of Souls. So absolutely, people watch this all the time, and I even think probably Scorsese watched these. Like, you just think about the directors of that generation and what they watched. Yeah, they probably watched this movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's that. I mean, it's definitely inspired David Lynch, George A. Romero, which is so funny. I love Romero. And like the fact that his penultimate film, had the same thing happen to it where it fell into the public domain
Yeah,
until
yeah.
recently. Like, isn't that
Yeah.
ridiculous?
No, no,
Like,
no.
that
That's
same thing
that's
happens.
hysterical. You make that, yeah, because Night of Living Dead was part of a distributor, and then the distributor, I think, went bankrupt, and it fell into the public domain. So he has seen no money from. I mean, I know he's passed, but he saw no money from that film, the greatest zombie movie ever made.
Absolutely right. Also, we talk about modern influences. I think this movie, when she's with Dr. Samuels, like their little like back and
Mhm.
forth, it's in a Lana Del Rey song, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that it's in there. But also, it is. It is. Listen. But wouldn't it make so much sense, because there's so much melancholy in this movie? It makes sense that Lana Del Rey has probably seen this movie. I'm not even gonna lie to you. The fact that she's not dressed up, like, wait, the fact that she's not dressed up like fucking Mary, like, is ridiculous. It's very much her style, her aesthetic.
I would watch her
Okay.
in a remake of this. Although I do want to see Florence Pugh in a remake of this, but I do,
Oh,
but I
god
think,
damn it, yes.
I think Lana Del Rey would actually do very well in this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
good. Oh my god, yes. And then also James Wan loves this movie apparently, and
Yes.
you could see his influences
So
too.
this is so James Wan. If you want to call me, my number is 919. So because I make a claim where I say James Wan obviously stole from Carnival of Souls for Insidious, especially. I mean, I think The Conjuring has a lot of moments that are taken from here, although The Conjuring is more taken from The Haunting, obviously, in those haunted house movies of the 30s. But there's a lot of things in Insidious where it's this infiltration of the ghouls into ordinary life. And so yeah, and then in Insidious 2, there's a full scene where Barbara Hershey wakes up and she's in a room and Carnival of Souls is playing on the TV behind her. So it's like it's very obvious he loves this movie, except he hasn't expressed that publicly. So James Wan, if you want to express that publicly, now's your chance.
I'm just saying,
The other thing I want to say
yes.
is It Follows very much took from
Yep.
this.
Yeah.
The very, sort of the presence, the I'm trying to run away, but I'm also trying, but they're also there, they're over there in the distance. And the fact that the man is kind of slower, not as slow as Romero's zombies. But then also two other things that I mentioned in the book, which is The Others with Nicole Kidman, is I think a direct ripoff of Carnival of Souls, where it's this sort of atmospheric trying to be, somebody you're not, and then ultimately finding out you're dead the whole time. And then also The Sixth Sense. Like no one
Yeah,
tracks.
I
Yeah,
agree.
no one tracks that The Sixth Sense stole from Carnival of Souls. Like no, like no
Yeah,
one, no
yeah.
one made that connection. It's kind of
People
insane.
want to make the argument. People want to make the argument that somehow, 20-something-year-old M Night Shyamalan was up one
For
night in
fuck's
1990
sake.
something
Yeah.
and was like watching. I wasn't gonna say that. I was gonna say that people want to claim that The Sixth Sense was a ripoff of an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, called The Tale of the Dream
Oh.
Girl. And because in that episode, it's this guy, he works at a bowling alley, and he sees this girl, and it's just like anyway, you find out he's dead the whole
Yeah,
time.
no,
That it was
no,
actually
no,
him and his girlfriend
no.
died or whatever. But anyway, so like, but people have stated like, oh, like M Night Shyamalan totally ripped off like this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark or whatever, right? But he didn't. Like, he probably did Carnival of Souls, to be honest. He's probably seen that movie. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. But then also, we were talking offline about this as well. This was very inspired by Shirley Fletcher, I think her name
Mhm.
is, and her story, The Hitchhiker,
Yes, yeah.
which I read in middle school and I loved
And
it.
which was also
And it was
adapted
also,
into Twilight.
but yeah, no, I definitely think, like, when it comes to this, yeah, you're totally right. I think with Lynch, like, I would like him to go on record. I feel like he has said that he's watched this movie before, maybe. But, like, yeah, you're totally right. Like,
Yeah.
you were talking about, like, Lost Highway, like, the guy who has, like, the Robert Blake, like, he is a literal homage to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
It's like
Balthazar
that.
Balthazar something is, yeah, he's
Yeah.
an homage to that. Yeah,
Like you were
yeah,
talking about with Eraserhead, which I cannot deal with half the time. But
yeah.
like, like you were saying, like Mary Henry is like the guy's name is Henry. What's the name of the girl in that he's with? Do you remember?
I don't
The
remember her name. I don't
I don't
remember
remember
her
her
name.
either. I
Yeah.
thought her name was Mary for some reason, which I was just like,
That
bitch, your
might be
name's
that might
so.
be it. Yeah.
Anyway, but like, but that, like, the radiator scene, the lady in the radiator
Mhm.
looks like a
Yeah.
ghoul. I mean, it's just these things where, like, we're talking about, like, the legacy of this movie. Again, so many people, like, no, you're totally right, though. I kind of wish that Lynch would just come out and say, like, I have homaged this before, which I don't think he really has.
Yeah.
And, I just kind of wish that, like, again, this movie is so criminally underrated. It's so beautiful and wonderful and so atmospheric that I think it's a disservice for any horror fan to not have seen it, especially for how accessible it is. It's on YouTube, y'all. I mean,
Yeah,
it's so
it's on
easy to
it's in the
find.
it still technically is in the public domain. I mean, the
Yeah,
restoration is copyrighted, but it's in the public domain. You can find it anywhere. So it's yeah,
exactly.
it's
Go
still
watch
great.
it.
And it's funny when I watch a lot of horror movies, I still see it. Like I still see parts of it. And obviously, The Sixth Sense, the ending, the twist ending is directly taken from this. But then also there are just this sort of like, is this person dead? Is this person alive? This surrealism that horror movies can move into is very much taken from this, which is kind of a revolutionary thing to think about because you think like, well, no, obviously someone did this before this, but this was 1962. And the biggest horror that it came out before it was really Psycho, which changed everything in 1960. And then even before that, it was Alien Invasion. It was Victorian, Dracula, Frankenstein. So this sort of American horror didn't emerge until after Psycho. This idea that the killer could be somebody who looks like you, who's next door, things like that. Or even with this, what's so great is that like the supernatural, the other world is invading in on our American lifestyle, which I think this movie does perfectly. But I'm giving it a lot of credit for what it did.
It deserves that much credit, which is why we're doing
Yeah.
that. Because like you were saying, like, right, I completely agree. Because, and also, we're both cisgendered gay men. Okay, I don't have a lady here to talk about it, but also just like this is one of those female unreliable narrator stories, you know. It deals with the psyche of a woman in particular, and is she going kind of crazy? Like, is she like, right, like, is she dead, is she alive, like what's going on with her, or whatever. This is in the if you have a Shudder account right now, it is in the movie collection of House of Psychotic Women, because it does kind of fit in there a little bit. But yeah, no, even talking about just like how John Lyndon treats her through the movie, and like the fact that she is perfectly content with not having a boyfriend or friends or things like that. And this is 1962, y'all. Like, this is still like, this is before the sexual revolution. This is when women still had a very particular place in the home. And Mary is a person who has a level of agency and a level of independence that I don't think, like, yeah, like,
I was gonna say,
she's seen as cold, but like
yeah.
she, I don't think is like,
I'm
you
just
know it, yeah.
I'm laughing because like everyone is so in her pants the entire
Yeah,
movie, and
she's so unbothered.
she's just like, just fucking leave me alone, like, because they're like,
Yes.
well, I don't know about organ music, and she's like, I just want to fucking play the organ, that's it. And Mr. Linden and Mrs. Thomas, like everyone is so inundating her with expectations, and she's so unbothered by it the entire time.
One of the things I
It's
love too, yeah, one of the,
yeah,
sorry to cut you off, but like
no,
one of the
yeah,
things I love is also that she sees her job as a job. And
yeah,
because her job is very much like in, church music, because she's an organist, but she even says, she's like, I just see my job as a job, I play for pay, and that's really it. So she's actively not really a religious person, but she works in religious environments. Like, that's another thing that people were like, probably like, oh my God,
right,
what?
right,
Like,
yeah.
she doesn't go to church. It's like, no, she goes there for work and she leaves, bitch. Like, who cares? Like, that's like so punk rock, I think. Like,
But
I
what's
don't know. Like, it was cool.
yeah, well, and what's great too is like I wrote a little bit about it in the book, where it was just like there's nothing about her sexuality, like, and normally in or nowadays, I should say, not normally, but nowadays in a movie where there's a strong female presence, oftentimes there is a component that is like, a relationship or remains of a relationship, or something, and something related to sexuality and intimacy. And for her, there's like a lack of any of that. And so it's not important, you know what I mean? Like, it's not anything that is trying to make a statement about feminism or women's sexuality or women or gender power dynamics. She just doesn't want a man in her life, and
Yep.
yet there are all
Yep.
these men who are trying to be with her, including the ghoul, who are trying to inundate her and capture her within this convention that society wants of her. So that's another reason I like the film. I'm like, I actually see it as a really feminist, women's liberation forward picture, because she is very much wanting to reject anything that society projects on her, and yet society is the thing that closes in on her at the end of the film.
I agree. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And yeah, oh my God, this movie is so good. Anyway, so we're going to just keep yapping about it, I guess, but we're going to then also now, since we talked about how much this movie is wonderful, how amazing it is, we're then going to move now into an actual plot summary of Carnival of Souls. All right, so we start our film with some drag racing. We get our like little opening credit of like who made the movie and who distributed it, but we have drag racing, and it's funny because these guys in a car, these old timey cars, and then these girls in a car, and I think Jackson was just saying like, you know, they say, what do they say again?
Gentlemen, start your no.
And
That's
so
that's RuPaul.
something.
That's RuPaul.
Yes.
But they say, want to drag, huh? Yeah. So it's
So
about
silly.
it's a battle of the sexes, men versus girls. Come on.
Yeah. So then they drag race a little bit, and you know they're like, all right, let's do it. So then what ends up happening is they're on this bridge and they're like neck and neck with each other and all this stuff. And then what ends up happening is the car with the women falls into the river that's above the bridge, or below the bridge, sorry. And then once they fall into the river, of course they have to call the guys have to call the police because they're like, oh my God, like we just had an accident. And then we have our opening title sequence of Carnival of Souls. We get like all of our like different people involved and all this, and this is very different than it feels different than any other movie I've seen because just the way it looks, I guess. But we're into our story now, so we see that they're looking for the car in the river, so the police have been called and all this, and they're doing a search. So they're just scanning the water, trying to figure out what's going on, all this kind of stuff. And then we see that I have in my notes, her name's Muddy Mary is what I call her.
Oh.
I know, I'm sorry. But Muddy Mary, because she's covered in mud, appears from the river and she walks up. And this is like one of the most striking images in the movie because it's so haunting. With her just covered in mud, her dress is all covered in mud, and she just has this look on her face that it's just so like unnerving, and it adds to the level of melancholy and atmosphere in this movie because you could see that she's just like, what the fuck just happened, you know? So she then comes back up on the bridge to watch the search party because she's like, oh no, my girls, like they must have like drowned, I guess, like, you know, and I survived somehow. Like, what the fuck, you know? So she's watching from the bridge. She then there's another car that's on the bridge, apparently. She gets into the car. And then we kind of just snap cut to another part of the movie where now Mary is playing organ because that is what she does for a living. She plays the organ. She's being watched by some dudes. So I guess in this realm, and Jackson, feel free to chime in or whatever, but I guess she's at the factory where it's made at. And so she's being watched by these dudes. And here we find that she's actually... we don't actually know where she lives at. I'm assuming this is Kansas, I guess. But she talks about how she's going to Utah to go take a job as an organist there. So, you know, and pretty much I have in my notes, I say Mary is fucking out of there because she even says to the owner of the factory and the worker she's like,
but I'm never coming back.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Fantastic. Great line. Great line.
She's just like, because they're like, oh, you could come back or whatever. She's like, I'm never coming back here ever. Like, I almost died. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Anyway, so she is driving along the stretch of road. So I guess from fucking Kansas to Utah, she's driving along this just like stretch of highway. And I'm assuming that you have done this drive, Jackson, because you're from the East Coast. So you must have.
No, I've never done this drive. I should do this drive. Drive. But I know Kansas. I know that drive. I've known people and family who have done that drive, and it's a long drive.
Yeah, long drive, and it's just nothing. That's what's creepy about it. It's just there's nothing there. And it's just like all this stuff. And I don't get that unless you go into the country, I guess, like where it's just flat. You know, so that also just adds to the weirdness. But anyway, so Mary's driving along, and she then sees this creepy ghoul dude who is played by the director of this movie. And he just like beckons her kind of, and he's just like there, like in the window, and she like freaks the fuck out and like goes on the side of the road, and she's just like, okay, like maybe I'm just seeing things, like I need to get some sleep, like I don't know what, right? So then we have our intro to Mary's new pad in Utah. She is a boarder, so she is like renting renting a room at this place, which is owned by Mrs. Thomas, who is an icon, and she's the landlady. So she's in her new little pad, and Miss Thomas is talking about, like, you know, how you can take as many baths as you want, because
So many
she's not
baths.
really
She's
big
really
on-
obsessed with Mary taking baths, which is
for whatever
weird.
reason. I don't know why.
Very weird.
But she's not one to be stingy about that kind of thing. And then she looks out her window and she sees the ghoul dude outside of her window again. And she's just like, okay, like, what the hell is this? Like, who is this guy? Like, I don't know. All right, whatever. So then we have our intro to Mary and the priest, because, again, she's working in a church. This is why she's come here. So Mary and the priest are talking, and I think they're talking a little bit about just like, oh, well, you know, we'd love for you to come to one of the services. And she's just like, oh, well, you know, I just kind of come to my job, and I don't really do a whole lot of that stuff. Like, you know, it'd be good to get, like, maybe some friends, or, you know, try to get a sense of community, but no, not really. I'm fine. And then we get into Mary playing some organ, because that's what she's there to do. So of course she is there to do that. So she's just playing organ. But then in the meantime, though, I guess during the course of this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess they were talking about, because during her drive, she was seeing this like lonely pavilion that is just out in the middle of Utah. And she was just interested in that. So she's like, hey, you know what? I passed by this place and I would like to see more of it. Like, do you think maybe we could drive over there? Because then Mary and the priest, her new boss, drive out to the freaky building, or carnival is what I put in my notes.
Right.
I didn't know what it was, but they drive over there. Yeah. So they're just there, but he's telling her about, like, how, oh, this is what this place is. Like, it hasn't been used. It's really just like, it's abandoned. Nobody's really supposed to go there, all that kind of stuff. And she's like, maybe I'll come back another time, or whatever. I'm like, okay.
Also,
girl,
I love his
guess.
look when she's like, I'll come back another time. And he's like, what the fuck? What do you mean you're going to come back? Why would you do that? Yeah.
Didn't I just tell you that it's abandoned and you shouldn't go there? Like, what are you doing? Anyway, okay. Whatever, girl. Anyway, my notes are all over the place, but I then have, okay, so she went to see the freaky, like, pavilion place, and her and her boss were driving out there. Then I have on my notes, I have landlady clomping down the stairs, because she is clomping down the... Yes. And I also mentioned this to Jackson beforehand, but this movie has, for the dubbing and sound of it all, the dubbing of an Italian giallo. Oh my God. Like, it was probably out of the fact that they didn't have money. Like, like, so a lot of this was ADR'd, like, after the fact. Honestly, like, that's why it just sounds like so weird, and some of the sounds kind of off, and I don't know. It's amazing though. But anyway, she climbs down the stairs like I was talking about, and she sees Mary, and, you know, they're talking about, like, hey, I'm about to make some food. Like, you know, I'll bring something up to you. Like, you know, you should have something to eat. And she's like, okay, that's great, Miss Thomas. That's fine. And then she's like, I'm going to take one of those baths that you told me about, or whatever. So we then see Mary taking a bath. And you know what I love about this movie? We were mentioning it a little earlier, but it's one of these movies that is just like, it was played on TV all the time. I would absolutely love, not that I'm a teacher or anything, I would love to play this for like some high schoolers, like on Halloween or something. Like, this is a perfect movie for that, because it's not violent. There's no blood. There's none of that. I just would love to show, like, some preteen to teenagers, like, you want to see a scary movie? Like, here's one you can watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Because it's so tame. Like, it's so tame, and but it's so fucking freaky, and you could then,
and unsettling. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And unsettling, and they could be like, what the fuck did I just watch? And it's perfect for that. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah. But then we see that Mary meets John Linden. We kind of saw him a little bit because Miss Thomas did say that, like, oh, it's just you, me, and, you know, Mr. Linden. Like, he's the guy who rents the other room. Yeah, so Mary meets him because, you know, he's in the house. And John is being a little bit of a peeper, because really what happened was that she thought it was Miss Thomas coming up with her food, but it wasn't. So, you know, she is in her towel and everything, and she's like, oh, okay, like, Mrs. Thomas is here. And she's like, oh shit, I thought you were Mrs. Thomas, like, you know. And he's like, oh no, like, you know, I'm the guy across the way or whatever. Be like, okay, cool. She was like, well, give me a minute, like, whatever. And then I was just saying, like, he's being a little bit of a peeper because you see that she's in her towel and then she puts on her robe and she, like, takes the towel off. And he's just looking at her kind of weird, like, as you would.
Yeah, he's a
'Cause
pervert. He's a
he's being a
pervert.
pervert.
Yeah, he's a
being a
pervert.
pervert. Yeah. Anyway, so then Mary invites him in pretty much to be like, okay, well, I guess if we're neighbors, like, we might as well get to know each other a little bit. But she kind of rebuffs him, though. Like, she's just like, yeah, okay, like, cool, but, like, go away. Like, I'm not really into seeing you right now. And so then, she rebuffs him, but then she's outside of her room in her little robe, and she then, looks down at the bottom floor at the ground level, I guess, and she sees that ghoul is there, and she's just like, what the fuck, who is this guy, dude? Like, what is this? And now he's in the place I'm at, like, what the hell? So she runs back into her, like, room. She's like, okay, God. But then it's Mrs. Thomas actually does come up and gives her some food and I think some coffee as well. So she eats a little something, she's gonna get some coffee, and so Miss Thomas is, there as well. I don't know what to even think about Mrs. Thomas. Like, I'm just like, what is she supposed to be, like, a fucking, like, allegory for, or whatever the hell? I don't know, but, like,
I think
she's there,
she's just kind of, I don't know. It's funny because she plays it like this very Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill kind of
oh,
like,
sure.
oh, I have such backstory and subtext, and yet she's not. She has no character development. So
No, not at all. Anyway, who knows?
yeah,
But anyway,
I
so
don't
then
know.
after she had her food and her coffee or whatever, Mary just can't sleep, and you just see this, like, shot of her in her bed, and she's just like, her eyes are open and she's just, like, looking, and she looks out the window to the pavilion because she could see it from where she lives. So it's just out in the dark and all that, and she just looks at it because she's just interested in it. She just can't take her eyes off. She just, like, can't take her eyes off of it for whatever reason. And I'm like, okay, girl, like, you got to look at this thing. I don't know why you're so interested in this place, but all right. So then we have Mary waking up, and John is at the door because he, like, knocks on the door because he wants to see her. He likes her. So then John and Mary, they decide he has coffee with him. And so he decides to, like, come in, and they're going to have a little, like, just, little nice morning thing. This is where we find out that she studied organ in college. That's what she does for a living. We find out that he had went to college before, but it wasn't really for him. He now works at the factory and all that. He's just, like, a down home kind of blue collar guy and whatever. So then John and Mary talk, they're getting to know each other, and I put in my notes, John is kind of charming, ? Like, he is.
Okay, is he
Yeah,
your type? He's not my type, but he's some
a little bit.
people's type. He's some
Hey,
people's
listen,
type.
maybe a little bit, but
Hey, come on. Pickens and you agree. So there you go.
hey,
Yes.
listen. Okay, I need my boy Pickens. All right, listen. Although he'll think anything with, like, two legs is fine, but whatever. Shout out Pickens, I love you. But anyway, so no, it's all good. But no, I mean, like, he's just, like, a guy, and yeah, sort of kind of charming. But anyway, he's like, oh, well, can I see you again? And she's just like, oh, don't you have to go to work? And she's like, no, I have the whole day for shopping, because that's what you do when you're a woman in the 60s, apparently. But anyway, so but she then go dress shopping. She goes out to the local department store, and Mary is trying on a dress and talking to the sales lady about it and blah blah blah. So then Mary is in the dressing room, and it's this weird kind of thing because, like, she just feels kind of odd. She feels a little off, I guess. That's what it seems like. And she is in the dressing room, and she's getting, like, her dresses back on that she wore in. And she goes out to the sales floor, and she is trying to interact with the sales girl to say, oh, hey, I like this dress. I'm going to, like, take it now. But the sales girl doesn't even know she's there. And so you're like, okay, what is this? Like, what the hell? So, like, all right, like, why, what, okay, you're rude. Like, okay, but then, like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, she's just trying to interact with other people, but she can't interact with anybody because they're not acknowledging her. And she's like, what the fuck is going on here, dude? So she goes through, like, the whole department store and, like, the whole, like, shopping center place, I guess. And she ends up going outside, and she just like walks down the road because she just is trying like, but nobody seems to like talk to her, and she's just like, what in the fuck? Like, what is this? So she ends up going to the park, and she just like walks to the park apparently, and she has her purse with her and everything, and I think what happens is that she takes a drink of water from like a water fountain or something, and then she sees this like figure.
Well, she's awakened by the bird noise. She's awakened by the bird noise. The silence that she had been experiencing is broken by this chirping of a bird, and then she goes to take a drink of water, and there's a figure standing next to her.
And she gets spooked by that. And so she's like, oh God, like, who's this? But then she meets Dr. Samuels, and Dr. Samuels is a doctor. We find out he's not a psychiatrist, I don't think he is.
He is not a psychiatrist. He says not
specifically. But he's just like, he meets her and he's like, oh, hey, like, come with me. Like, you know, I'll help you kind of talk out whatever you were talking about. So Mary goes to his office and she's talking to him about what I consider an episode of non-existence, I guess I'll say. Like, she's having this episode of like the outside world is not interacting with her, and she's experiencing that, and she's just talking about what it felt like for that. And I don't know if this could then be an allegory for like, well, we find out. So I also say in my notes, Mary and Dr. Samuels argue, but the reason they're arguing is because he's trying to say that this is because of a significant trauma that she just witnessed, she just had happen to her when, you know, she fell in the fucking river with her friends. And so that is a manifestation of the trauma that she was dealing with.
But he also tries to pin it on, did you have, you know, a father figure or a man in your life kind of thing? So that to me kind of cancels itself.
And then also,
out.
it's just like her talking about like, you know, I don't really have like a need for people, you know, contact for people or whatever, which I think is in Lana Del Rey's song. But anyway, so like, you know, it's just them kind of going back and forth. I know you can't stand me, but it's fine. But anyway, that's
fine. No, it's fine. I'm convinced Lana Del Rey has seen
she's watched it
Carnival of Souls now.
But anyway, so they just kind of go back and forth or whatever, and she's just like, okay, like, you know, whatever, dude. Thanks for talking to me, I guess, but like, yeah, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about, which he doesn't. He's not a psychiatrist. But anyway, so, and she's just like kind of not really into psychiatry anyway. She doesn't really want to talk about how she feels. Like, she's just like, no, I'm just keeping it moving, whatever. So then I have my notes. I have Mary decides to go out to the pavilion to investigate. And what this means to me is that at some point after she leaves the doctor's office, she then goes home, I guess, and we don't see her go home. We just see her driving out because she talks about this place to Dr. Samuels, and she's just like, well, I guess I'll go out there. So she just goes out to this place, the pavilion, and she investigates. So what that means is that she is just there to walk around the pavilion, and she sees all of the stuff there, which some of it is kind of carnival stuff, hence the title Carnival of Souls. But like, you know, it's just, she's walking around this place and the outside of it, and it's just really, I think we already talked about it, but like, this is where we're seeing how atmospheric this movie is and just how melancholy it is, you know, and a sense of melancholy it has, where, you know, it's just these shots of Candace Hilligoss just like walking around, and like, yeah, they're just so striking to watch, and you're just like, oh my God, like, this is all done on location too, like, this is all real stuff. So yeah, she sees all of that.
Yeah, and how vast it is, and you're right, how isolated she is with all of it.
And then also, it just goes into that. When they're talking with Dr. Samuels, you know, I don't know if there's that. I get the feeling that, she was been through trauma, but like, she's also maybe kind of I don't know, like, she may have a little bit of a depressive episode kind of here and there, but like, overall, she's not like super sad, I guess. Like, whatever. Like, she has a normal level of depression, maybe, that a normal person would have, or a person who doesn't deal with severe depression. But, like, she's just not affected by the world a ton, I guess. Mary then enters a building. She goes into a building, the pavilion, I guess, and she finds this huge dance hall. And so she just looks up at it and she's just like looking around. Then we have it's not split second, but it's like a few second shot of a ghoul in a tub. So he's just like under the water.
Right.
Yes,
Herk Harvey in a tub. Yeah.
And then Mary then comes back home after looking at this. Because again, she told her boss she wants to go see this place. And she finally did. Because she's just so interested in it. She's just so drawn to it. So John comes home with her as well, and they like come at the same time. And John wants to go on a date with her, and he asks her like, "Hey, I'll take you out. Like we should go out sometime." But she declines with him to go out, and he's like, "Hey, I want to ask you something. Like, are you afraid of men? Like, you know?" And she's just like, "No, not really." Like, but then he's like, "Hey, well, you know, I think it'd be better for me to pick you up from, you know, if you're going to be at the practice tonight," like, because she says, "Oh, I have to go to the church tonight to go practice and whatever." And she's just like, he's like, "Well, it'd be better, you know, you walking with me than you walking home by yourself." She's like, "Okay, that's fair. All right, well, come on, pick me up then and meet me after I'm done practicing," pretty much. And he's like, "All right, you got it, girl." She goes to she goes to church. She goes to practice at the church. And she is just playing this beautiful, spooky music because she initially is doing her regular, just like, you know, religious ass, like, you know, organ music or whatever. But then she's playing this like really spooky, beautiful music that's happening.
Yeah, her hands are possessed by something that makes her play this what would become unorthodox.
And this is where we get the
music,
surrealism of this, because we hear this score throughout, and then we're now into Mary being into like a creepy nightmare pretty much, where like she's at the pavilion she was just at, and the ghouls are like beckoning to her. So this is where we see the ghouls coming up from the water, and like they're just beckoning to her, and she's just watching them, and the ghouls dance around. You know, so again, this is where Herk Harvey just wanted that in his movie. Everything else was written around it. But yeah, they dance around while the organ plays, and Mary just starts to look really frightened. She just like is watching these ghouls dance, and she just looks scared. She's just like, oh God, oh God. But then we're back. So again, it's that weird, and it goes on for like a few minutes, really, like that whole scene. And then it is a long sequence.
Yeah, it's a long
sequence.
sequence.
It's like, so that's surreal. That's the nightmare part of this. This is like that weird surrealism. But then we're back in the church, and the priest finds Mary, which I say is playing sacrilegious music, which it's unorthodox, if you will, yes. And he fires her ass.
No, he does say that. He goes, "Profane,
yes, blasphemy," or whatever.
Sacrilege.
Yeah. And so he fires her
How
ass,
dare
which
you?
is just like, and he says like, it's not because I don't want you to turn your back on the church, but, you know, all that. And she just like takes her book and walks down the stairs, doesn't even talk to him.
But also, like, he's a fucking dick. He's such a cop out. He goes, I just don't like what you do, but I don't think you should really be stupid here. And it's
yeah,
so
like
stupid.
What else is she supposed to do there? She moved for this job and now she's fired. What the fuck? But anyway, so she leaves there, and John is outside to pick her up, and so he doesn't know anything about this. She doesn't mention it to him or anything, but, you know, from what I gather. But again, they're just walking, you know, walking. So they're gonna, John takes Mary out to a local, like, place, like a local dance hall thing with a little jukebox, and they're having drink and stuff. You know, she's not really drinking, but he is. I also low-key think that, like, he's kind of an alcoholic, maybe, a little bit. He tries to say he's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He's just like, I like a drink here and there, because he starts off his day when they were talking before with a little bit of alcohol. But he definitely kind of is.
Yeah, he starts at like 9 a.m.
I said,
he
is John an
drinking,
alcoholic?
so.
And I'm like, yes, he is.
Yes.
Yeah, so he takes her out, but now he's just
1000%.
kind of being a dick to her, because he's pretty much calling her cold. He's calling her frigid. I think he even mentions that she's frigid. Like, somebody calls her frigid.
Yeah, he calls her
really
frigid.
Rude,
yeah, he
and
does.
I think is like, oh my God, I would have punched him. Oh, I have that in my notes too. So wait. So John meets a friend of his, Chip. And Chip is like interested in Mary, and he's like, don't go for her. Like, that's my girl. Like, don't go for her. It's like, okay, whatever. So then, So John and Mary talk, and John kind of mentions like, oh yeah, he's a college friend of mine, and he was talking to me about like how you're not interested, or like how you don't seem that interested to be here with me. And oh, that's what he says. He says John tells Mary to thaw out. Thaw out, really? But he calls her
Thaw
frigid
out.
pretty
That's
much.
right. That's right. Yes, that's right. Uh-huh. Yeah, because he goes, why don't you thaw out? Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, so as we were already saying, like fucking like John tells her to thaw out, which is her being called a frigid bitch pretty much, which is just rude. So John and Mary go back, they leave and go home because they live in the same place. John calls her a frigid bitch pretty much, and that's really rude, and I hate that. But they go back home because they do live in the same place, obviously. And so Mary comes back up to her room, and John is being a perv because he's like, oh, you want to go in that room like by yourself or whatever? It's all dark. She's just like, yeah, I think I'll manage, but okay, bye. Like, you know, again, she's just like not into this at all. And again, it just kind of shows that like she was doing this with John. She was trying to make that work, but then that didn't really end up going anywhere. And so she sees, she goes in her room, and then she sees the ghoul in there, and she freaks out because like she's seeing him, but John is not seeing anything. So he's just like, okay, you're a wackadoo, apparently, and we're not gonna work like this. I'm gonna like just run off pretty much. And so in this point she then breaks down. So I think at this point she's literally like, all right, like I don't have a job here, I don't have a guy here, okay, whatever, I guess I'm just gonna pack all my stuff up. So she packs up her things in a suitcase or two, I think it was a suitcase, and she leaves. So Mary drives to a garage. So she's like on her way driving, and her car is squeaking. So like she drives, and she drives to this garage, and she sees the attendant there. So he's like, put it up on the lift, and she was like, can I just sit here? Pretty much. And he's just like, that's fine, that's up to you. So she goes up on the lift in her car and all of this. And so then we see that the attendant is like somewhere else. I don't know where he went. But then the some spooky figure, we don't actually see who it is, comes into the garage, and she like somehow falls out of her car, I guess is what happened.
Or is pulled.
Oh yes, true. And then goes running. So she is just like, oh my god, fuck this, like I don't know what's going on. And then this is another one of her episodes she's having of non-existence. So this is like she runs into the bus station, but nobody's acknowledging her, and she's just trying to like find some help pretty much. And so like she runs onto the bus platforms where like the buses are, and she's just like trying to run, and then I say in my notes, Mary runs to the ghoul bus, because that's literally what it is. She runs onto a bus that has all these ghouls, and it's just like, oh god, and then she's running away. So, you know,
well, she hears an announcement. No one behind the counter acknowledges her, and so she hears this weird, mysterious reverb announcement, and so she goes onto the bus and finds all of these ghouls there, waiting for her supposedly, so she runs right off of it. Yeah.
So yeah, you have these people running out. You got people running off the ghoul bus. It's just creepy. But then Mary runs back to Dr. Samuels's place. And so she's there, and you see his chair's like turned around or whatever. And she's just talking to him about whatever. But then you find out it's the ghoul bitch, is what I have in my notes. So it's not Dr. Samuels, it's literally the ghoul, which has a different like view of it now, knowing that Herk Harvey was not the nicest to her on set, which is just really crazy. But anyway, you find that it's actually just a dream all the time, because it's very much like the third wall breaking, where she just screams to the camera. And so then Mary like drives out of the garage. She's like, fuck this, I'm gone. So then she drives back to the pavilion. So she's walking, and she walks through the pavilion, she walks back into that building, and she looks out at the mountains. She's just looking out there and, you know, just doing what she could. And so now we're getting to near the end of the film, and the ghouls come out of the water as they did in her nightmare beforehand, and they start to slow dance again. And now you're noticing like Mary's off to the side, but actually she's in with the ghouls, kind of, because I felt like the main ghoul is dancing with somebody who looks a lot like Mary, but who's a ghoul or whatever.
Yeah,
And so I was like,
we
Mary's a
don't
ghoul?
see we don't see who he's dancing with in the
Yeah.
first dance scene, but then this
Yeah.
time around it zooms in and it's her.
Yeah, exactly. So then we're like, oh, okay. So then Mary screams again. She's just like, oh my God. And the ghouls are now chasing her. So the ghouls chase her and everything. And this is that scene where, like, I think some of it was cut out. And also, one of the fun things I mentioned to you, Jackson, was like, you can see at this point in the film, because this was done on film, like you could see like the film kind of bubbling a little bit during this time, because it's like dark and all of this stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Well,
seeing
and
that.
he does some really interesting things. Like there's some pretty intricate editing tricks he does, like speeding up. It sounds so basic, but the fact that he's speeding up film and he's also shooting scenes in real time where somebody he just uses space in such a great way where like somebody pops out of this dark shadow from around the bed, like around the corner, and it's brilliant. Yeah, he uses all of that, and the
Yeah.
bubbling of the film, yeah, makes it look almost kind of documentary a little bit.
Yeah,
Like
it
you're
does.
like, oh shit, this is actually happening.
Yeah, no, and they chase her pretty much, and they catch up with her, and then it's just like really creepy, and we don't know what they do with her really. I don't know if they kill her. I guess like I don't know. They just catch up to her, and they just like are like whatever, right? So then
Yeah.
we have that scene. It's like really creepy, and then the cops and the priest come to the pavilion because I guess they're like, well, Mary just kind of disappeared out of town. We don't know what happened to her. So like now we got to like figure out what's going on with her. And we're like, okay, cool, I guess. And so, but they see that like her footsteps stop at a point, which is the point where like the ghouls caught up with her. And so they're just trying to investigate her disappearance, but like they're just like, okay, well, I don't know where she went. Like, all right, well, whatever, we'll shrug it off, I guess,
Yeah.
because that's really what they do.
What's really cool about that scene is like you get this sense when you watch it that
Mm-hmm.
not that they're in on it, but you're kind of like they don't question
Yeah.
it. They just kind of accept it. So that's what I
Yeah.
love about it. It's so subtle what Herk Harvey does, but it's just this like the priest and the policeman, like they don't ask any questions. They just like look at each other, and it's almost
Yeah.
this acceptance that like something happened here, but we're not going to talk about it. So
Yeah,
it's a
I
brilliant
agree.
way. It's a brilliant weird question mark to end on.
Yeah, it's a weird question mark to end on, like you were saying. And so we're coming up on the end of the movie, and we are back in Kansas. And pretty much what happens is the police in Kansas are back at the river from the beginning, and they are, I guess, starting to fish out the car from earlier. And so then we find out in a twist ending of all sorts that Mary has actually been in this car with her friends the whole time, question mark. Like she's pretty much been dead the whole time, I guess. Or maybe it was like the ghouls that just caught up with her, like put her into the car again. I don't know. I tend to think of it as she's been dead this whole time, and then this whole movie has just been kind of like a, I don't know, like a manifestation of something to her, or her last moments, or what she wanted her life to be, or something like that. But yeah, we end in that way of she's been dead the whole time, and this is what we've seen. And then that's the end of Carnival of Souls. So, in regards to this particular film of Carnival of Souls, I personally would say, I mean, it's so influential to the horror genre. I mean, it just, everything about it, it's so
Mhm.
atmospheric. It is so, uh, just has a level of melancholy and dread in a way, that I just think is fabulous for this. I mean, it's definitely one of the first psychological horror films ever,
Yes.
and it is just something where I'm like, I don't want to be a gatekeeper or anything to the horror community, but I mean, if you haven't seen Carnival of Souls, like, you need to get on that. I mean, what are you doing? Like, you need to,
Yeah,
because
no excuse, no excuse,
no
no
excuse at
excuse.
all, like, at all. And I mean, it's so readily accessible as well. You know, it's on YouTube, it's on Shudder, it's on Tubi. Like, there's so many ways you can watch it. Like, there's no reason to not watch it, which is, you know, just the big thing for me. Uh, I will say, I did want to ask you before. So,
Mhm.
this is a movie that, you know, is from 1960. They did make a 1990 something remake that happened. Have you seen it at
Uh,
all?
I haven't. No, I did have to do research on it for the book. John Carpenter put his was it John Carpenter or Wes Craven? One of them. I think John Carpenter put or no Wes Craven. Wes Craven put his name on as a producer, but I don't. But he wasn't involved in any of it.
Yeah.
So no, it has nothing to do with this movie. In fact, there's a foreign film. I forget the name of it at the moment, but there's actually a foreign film
Right.
that is more inspired by it. It's the name of a woman, but the Carnival of Souls remake, no, is terrible and actually pretty bad from the synopsis that I read.
Oh yeah,
Woman's
like,
like,
it's just
yeah, woman's like assaulted by a clown, and then there's trauma later, so like it's just weird. It's yeah, I mean, it's just a title at that point, might as well make it a comic book series at that point.
like,
Jeez.
literally, you might as well.
Literally. So yeah, I haven't seen it and I have no plans to see it ever.
I don't disagree with you. You did mention a little bit earlier, though, because we did talk about how Lana Del Rey has definitely seen this movie. You said about a remake. I mean, not that I would
Yeah,
want this to be remade. It doesn't need to be.
right,
However,
right.
we're gonna play a little wrap up game, just a little bit,
Oh yes, okay.
because I want to know. You already kind of said who you would want to play Mary, but if you could have like a little dream cast of Carnival of Souls that could be remade, who would you want to be in that movie?
Well, I said Florence Pugh, I think would be great. Or
Mm-hmm.
Saoirse would be
Oh
really good
yes, I
as
like that.
Mary.
Yeah.
I think Saoirse would be a really good Mary. I think it would be great to see like Emma Thompson as Mrs. Thomas.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I can get with that.
Um, yeah,
We don't need a
Andrew
Meryl
Garth.
Streep like that, but we need somebody who's like a real good actor.
No, I think Emma Thompson. Andrew Garfield as Mr. Linden would be really fun.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. I can
That
get.
would be really good. For the I'd love what's his name? Skarsgård for the man.
Ooh,
Um
okay. A Bill
I,
Skarsgård.
either Bill Skarsgård or Alex Skarsgård or the other Big Little Lies Skarsgård.
The Big Little Lies part. I will go with
The
it.
Big
Yeah.
Little Lies one. Like one of the Skarsgård boys needs to be the man. And then, oh god, the men are so interchangeable. They're terrible.
Yes.
So it could be anybody. Actually, what would be really interesting, what would I really like is kind of like that movie Men that came out a few
Okay.
like a year ago, but like have Andrew Garfield play all the male parts except the ghoul. So like Andrew Garfield plays the priest in old makeup, and Andrew Garfield plays the a factory manager in like a
Yeah, yeah.
fat suit, and then plays Mr. Linden. Like it would be really interesting to have him
I'm
like
not opposed to
transform
that, actually.
all
That's
of
kind
those.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, because they are so interchangeable. You're
What
so
about
right.
what about you? What about you?
Girl. Oh my God. Yeah. Ooh.
Lana Del Rey, obviously, as
Obviously.
Mary
No, she could do
Henry.
the score. I think she could do the score for me.
Yeah, that would be good.
Some
Just
of the
one
music. No.
Carnival of
Yeah.
Souls. Yeah,
Mhm. Yes.
something
Yes.
like
I would
that.
love that.
Yes.
No, I'm trying to think. I mean, you got some good ones. I think. Ooh, girl. I don't even know. I mean, like, listen, it's because I love these people. I think Toni Collette could be a
Uh-huh.
fabulous Mrs. Thomas. She'd be kind of fun.
Oh, she'd
Uh,
be
I would
fantastic.
love
Yeah,
that.
she'd be
Yeah.
great.
I'm gonna go with you on Bill Skarsgård doing his barbarian thing and being Mr. Linden. I think that'd be
Yeah.
fun, actually.
Yes. Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah, I
very
think that'd be
barbarian
actually
vibes,
really
yeah.
good. I think, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that
gonna take
actually would be
yours.
great.
And then the main
Love
actress,
that.
I mean, to be honest with you, because I want to see a.
Actually, Sydney Sweeney would be good.
Ooh,
She
yeah.
would be a good Mary Henry.
Ooh,
Sydney
that's
Sweeney.
true.
Yeah, she would be really good.
I would
Yeah,
also
and she's
love
on
to
the up and
see.
up. Or
Yeah. Maybe it's because I love her so much. I kind of want to see a non-white Mary. I would be down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Of
trying to
course.
think of a good actress of color. I
Yeah.
mean, my mind goes to Jasmine Savoy Brown because I think she's very strong
she'd be
too.
great.
I
She'd
want
be
her
great.
to. She has to be very
Yeah.
vulnerable, but I think she can do that. Any of the girls in Yellow Jackets, maybe any of them. I'm a Yellow Jackets fan, so but but yeah, no, like somebody
Yeah.
who like is an up and comer kind of person. But I want her to. I would love to
Yep.
see a non-white portrayal of her. I really would. I would love to see a
Yeah,
black
that
girl
would be
step
good. That
into
would be
it.
good.
I would love that. Hell,
Yeah.
even give the girl from Barbarian a chance. I don't know, like put her and Bill Skarsgård together.
Yeah,
and
she
have
was
the
great.
Carnival of Souls.
She'd be fantastic.
Why
Yeah,
not?
that would be a great reunion.
You just need
actually.
somebody.
Yeah,
you
I
need
love
a
that
lady.
idea.
Yeah, you need a lady who can be vulnerable because she does have this emotional vulnerability, but then also is kind of strong-willed. And I think, like I said, anybody who can play that, which generally these Hollywood actors hopefully can do that. Otherwise they don't have much careers. I just think like it would be fantastic. And I said Night of the Comet doesn't really need a remake. I don't think it does, but I wouldn't mind a remake of this. Maybe.
I would love a remake of that. Yeah, especially with the stars of today. So like the Sydney Sweeneys, the Austin Butlers. Like it would be really good to see all of those people remake that, especially. Yeah,
I totally agree. Let's not put Ari Aster into it. We don't need it. It doesn't need to get that weird. Okay.
Oh no. We don't want to ruin it. Come on. Yeah.
Oh God!
Let's get Sam Raimi back to remake Night of the Comet. I think that would be really good. Actually, seriously, a Sam Raimi remake of Night of the Comet that actually might be good.
I was saying that I didn't want a remake, but you might just turn me on, and I don't know. Anyway, I
think Sam Raimi would do a good job.
I think he would too, actually. But Jackson, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. We've had some technical difficulties, which is fine. It's okay. But I think if anything, I love finding other people who love movies just as much as I do, and who are also cult heads as well with this kind of cinema. And I'm just I'm happy to have anybody on my show who loves this stuff just as much as I do. So I'm very happy to have had you on. Yeah. And I know that this episode I think it'd be great. It's been awesome because, we're getting to talk about movies that some people don't always know about. And I really like that. So I'm so happy that you came on.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I had a great time. Thank you.
You want people to follow you and stalk you on social media if you want? You can plug
yourself. Follow me on Instagram. Yeah, follow me on Instagram, jackson.cooper.arts. I post a lot about movies and my own stuff. So, yes, and be on the lookout I'm working on a book right now on bizarre noir movies, so weird noir movies. So like the cult and bottom of the barrel noir movies. So I'm working on that right now. And yes, I will be. Yeah, that's it.
I love it.
And hopefully I'm not found dead in my New York apartment by the time people hear this. So yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You're hopefully not like Dorian Corey, I guess. Like we're hoping not,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully I'm not a mummified corpse in a closet by then. But yes, follow me on Instagram. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Jackson. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and hope you have a good rest of your night, okay? As always, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so at cultcinemacircle@gmail.com. If you'd like to give any movie recommendations, give feedback on the show, or if you'd just like to say hey, I'm open to all of it. You can also follow the show on Instagram at Cult Cinema Circle and on Twitter at Cult Cinecircle. I tend to announce the movies that I'm going to be covering and just interact with people on there if they want. You can also follow me on Letterboxd at Jesse, Jesse, Kremp, Kremp, all one word. On that platform, I tend to log the movies that I watch. I write little stupid reviews about them and just general foolishness over there. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast on your podcatcher of choice, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm pretty much on all of them. Be sure to leave 5 stars and a 1 to 2 sentence review about the show so we can grow the audience and then just spread the love all around. Be sure to tune in next week to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast, where I'll be covering 2001's Legally Blonde. Elle Woods, a fashionable sorority queen, is dumped by her boyfriend. She decides to follow him to law school. While she is there, she figures out there is more to her than just her looks. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. And remember, I don't belong in the world. That's what it is. Something separates me from other people. Take care. Bye.